Hi guys, welcome to Sister's Kitchen. Today we're going to be making a pho-inspired beef noodle soup. So if you're ready, let's get started. You'll need fresh garlic, fresh chilies of your choice, shallots, fresh ginger, fresh lemongrass, fish sauce, beef, fresh limes, soy sauce, sesame oil, Mirin, don't dump it like I did, mushrooms, spring onion, any kind of other veggies you want, and rice noodles. So you're going to need a big pot to boil your broth, a sieve and a heat-proof bowl for later, something to measure your water in. Apparently this is called a burner, but it's for heat dispersion. Oh, and a spatula. And a heavy mallet if you have one. Let's start by getting 1.5 liters of water and just putting that in our pot. Then we're going to grab fish sauce and just put a tablespoon in our water. So next we're going to add some fresh ginger, and I love making tea out of fresh ginger, but for today for our broth it's just going to give us that sort of earthy, spicy kick to it. Alright, so now we're going to add some garlic, and I cook with garlic pretty much all the time because while it's a really distinct flavor, I find that it just helps bring everything together a bit. Otherwise your food just kind of ends up tasting a little bit bland. What I like to do is pull this little middle bit out because that tends to be sort of bitter, so I just pop it out like that. Now time for shallots. I've got a big one and a medium-sized one, and I like using shallots instead of onions because I find that they have a very distinct flavor but not an overpowering one. Alright, now for some chili if you want to add a little kick. I've got a Madame Jeanette here and I'm just going to slice that into little rings. Got some lemongrass here and that's going to help get us that sort of more traditional flavor. And here's where the fun bit comes in with the mallet if you want. So what we're going to do is just smash and smash so that we've sort of crushed the inside, and that'll help get the flavor out. Add a cube of bouillon. And now we can set it to boil, and while we wait for it to boil, we can start on our beef. We're going to start with some soy sauce, about 1.5 tablespoons, then some mirin, about 1 tablespoon, and some sesame oil, and that'll also be about 1 tablespoon. So now we're going to add lime, and it's going to help sort of keep the meat tender, but it's also going to give us that little bit of sour flavor that we're looking for. Now depending on your meat, you might want to blot it dry first. I usually just do that with a paper towel, as you can see here. I get a nice sharp knife and I'm just going to cut a chunk off, turn it on its side, and then slice it into a couple millimeter thick bits. Now I do this because it helps me to cut against the grain because I find it really hard to see, but here you can see sort of the thickness and what the meat looks like. So now we've cut our beef and we're going to sort of pour our concoction into it and mix it up a little bit so that we get all of it on all of the meat. And then we're going to let it rest for about 1 hour in the fridge, and you really want to cover it because that's just sort of more hygienic that way. Alright, so here you can see our broth has kind of boiled down a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the flame down, we're going to put the heat disperser down, and we're going to just put the broth back on with a lid on it for at least 1 hour, but you can do this up to 4, it really doesn't matter that much. So now that we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to pour it all out into the strainer and the heat-proof bowl so that we can separate the broth from the vegetables that we've been boiling in it. So as you can see, the broth is pretty clear, and we're just going to put that back in the pot. Alright, so it's been about 1 hour and we're just going to quickly check on our beef to see how it's come out. So as you can see, it's all turned a little bit brown and we've made sure that we have all of the sauce everywhere. Now we're going to put some water on for the rice noodles and we're going to put that to boil hard. We're going to take the broth off the heat disperser and just turn that up a bit. And now we're going to work on our garnishing. So what I've got here is a little bit of spring onion. I like using spring onion because you see it in a lot of various Asian dishes, and I find that it gives it that little bit of an oniony undertone that works really well with the shallots. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and prep our vegetables. You can use pretty much anything that you want to add to your soup. Personally, I really like asparagus tips, so I went with that. I also use baby corn. Today I also went with oyster mushrooms. Normally I go with shiitake, but they were looking a bit sketchy in the store, so I decided against that. But you can use whatever it is that you really like. So now for the messy bit, we're going to take the meat that we have left marinating and we're going to separate it into 2 bowls. Now I do this by hand because what I want to do is spread the meat out in the bottom of the bowl. Because the point is, you don't actually cook the meat yourself. What you do is you pour the boiling broth over it and you let that hot water just cook the meat itself. So you want to spread it out a bit, and you can see me just kind of fiddling with it here. Alright, so broth is boiling and we're going to throw our veggies into it to let them cook a little bit. And the water is boiling, so we're going to put our rice noodles in. Mine have to cook for 4 minutes, so I'm just going to do that. So our noodles are done, which means that we can strain them. Alright, so our broth is done, so what I'm just going to do is I'm going to scoop the broth and the vegetables into each bowl, and we're going to let that boiling hot broth just cook our meat a little bit. Now, in go the noodles. These are always a little bit sticky, so it's a little bit tricky when you first start out, but you get used to it. Now I'm going to add a little bit of spring onion to garnish it. Usually you use coriander, but I'm just one of those people who thinks it tastes like soap, so do what you like. Now you can add whatever extras you want. I like to add a little bit of Sriracha and then a little bit of Hoisin over the top just to give it that little extra flavor. So this is our final product, and you can smell sort of the ginger and lemongrass and garlic in it. The meat's all cooked through but still very tender, and the nice thing about this recipe is you can just add whatever it is that you like to make it your own. Thanks for joining me at Sister's Kitchen, and I really hope to see you guys back soon.